Welcome to That Weird Friend podcast. I'm your host, Ariana Kaminsky, and if you're weird, I hope you'll be my friend. Hello, so today it's a little rainy out, so if you hear some rain in the background, I'm sorry, but I didn't want to not record because it's raining. Today we are going to go into my favorite TV shows, most of which I've gotten into this year, but some of them I've watched previous years, but I figured to include them in this list because all of these shows I have seen this year, whether that's rewatching them or watching them for the first time. So let's get right into it. This is in no particular order, but these are my favorite 10 TV shows of all time. Number 1 is Atypical. It's on Netflix, and it is about a kid in high school who has autism, and the show it's told in a lighthearted way, and it's funny and relatable. And as someone who's had to deal with like a brain injury, I related to like a lot of the storyline where the boy feels left out and that he doesn't know how to fit in because he doesn't understand why he doesn't fit in and why other people see him as different, because to him he's just himself. I really related to him and all the struggles that he went through, even though obviously with a concussion it's different than having autism, but it's dealing with some similar emotions. And I also liked how it showed how the different family members deal with it, and they deal with it in their own way, some better than others. Some TV shows I feel like they write from the outside, and I feel like this show wrote from the inside, meaning they showed like raw moments instead of writing how taking a real moment and then making it for TV. Instead they took a real moment and like still kept it a real moment in the show. So I enjoyed that, and I enjoy shows that are more realistic and not like a reality show where you can tell like this would not happen in real life. That takes me out of the show when something happens and I'm like, yeah, that would not actually happen. That's when I turn the show off and I'm like, I'll find something else to watch. Let's move on to the next show. It is Dickinson, which stars Haley Steinfeld, and it's about Emily Dickinson loosely, but I mean, I watched interviews with the creator Alina Smith, I'm pretty sure her name is, and a lot of the show is based on things that Emily wrote about. It's used as like a seed to build the show around. Obviously, if you watch the show, it's not like point for point accurate, but it plays off of the tone and the spirit that the creator thought that Emily Dickinson would have had. And it's a really funny show. It's not serious. It's historical in the fact that it takes place when Emily Dickinson was alive, but the language used is modern, the music is modern. So I really like that like juxtaposition between like the old school, the atmosphere, but then Emily is like ahead of her time in her thinking and like being forceful as a woman, and it's really relatable. Again, obviously the shows I like the best are I find the most relatable. I enjoyed how all the characters aren't just one note. You really can see the bad parts of them as well as the good parts of them. I like how also like the male characters, they're not like seen as just one note bad, because I think sometimes movies or TV, they show like they want to show that the woman character is being good, so they make the male character bad, which kind of doesn't sit right with me because I feel like everyone has a good and bad side. So Emily's brother and her father and her friends, they show their good sides, and at first maybe like disagreeing with Emily and not liking how she wants to do things that are typically for men only, but then over time they see that this is who she is and that it's okay, that they start to accept her, and you see their growth, and I appreciate that, and how they weren't just trying to pinpoint as some people as being bad and some as good. It changes throughout the show on how you feel about people, and the more you learn about them, the more you can empathize with them. And I appreciate that in the writing, and how things are so funny, and it's like a one-of-a-kind show. The ending of it, because they stopped, it's all done with, same with Atypical, like there's no new seasons. The ending scene I enjoy like the last scene of the last episode of the last season, but I have heard from other people that they don't really like it as much. It's more of like an open-ended type of ending where it's interpretive, and I think some people want more of like a solid ending to like have this like bookmark in their brain of when the show ended. But to me, I like that it was open-ended, and I feel like it's symbolic with her poems because her poems can be interpreted differently. So the fact that the ending of the season is open-ended, I think is really smart for her, and it works for her. And Dickinson you can watch on Apple TV. It's one of the Apple originals, so you can't watch it on anything else. And while we're on Apple TV, let's move on to Ted Lasso, which is also on Apple, and it's highly acclaimed. It's won so many Emmys, and everyone knows that it's great. I have to admit that when I first started watching it, I watched part of an episode and I turned it off because I'm like, this is a sports show, this is not good, and I stopped. And then when I got Apple TV another month, like maybe a year later, I was like, let me give this show another try. It's won a lot of Emmys, and a lot of people who I respect like the show. So I'm like, maybe this is more than just like people crowding around a show for no reason because it's popular. Maybe it actually has some depth to it. So I forced myself to finish watching the first episode. I watched the second episode, and then I was hooked on the characters, and I started to find the humor in the show, and I like the lessons, like the moral lessons that are in Ted Lasso, and how they're sprinkled around, and they're told to you, but in this Ted Lasso vernacular that it's not as like woohoo, like it's not as in your face, it's more funny and like, no kidding, that's real. Like, he says things that are like, no kidding, that's true, but it's not something that people incorporate in their lives usually. It's something that seems so true that why don't I incorporate that into how I live, but I don't. And just being reminded those things as you're watching is fun. Feels like you're learning. I like shows and TV. I like stories that has like some type of purpose where at the end of it you're like, I learned something from that. Whether you learned about yourself or if you learned like a lesson that maybe you could incorporate into your life and how you live. If I watch a show and I feel like I didn't learn anything about me or the world, then I feel like I wasted my time, and I feel bummed that I can't get that time back. So to watch a show and feel that way after, it makes you feel good and that you used your time wisely, and it makes you feel okay about watching a comedy for so long, because sometimes comedies, I used to be a real hater of comedies, and because they didn't feel very beneficial, but over the past few years with the pandemic, that's what I've been watching all the time, comedies, and I've really seen to appreciate it and to stop bad mouthing them, because sometimes you just need to laugh, and you don't need a moral lesson, you just need to laugh, and that is good enough, even though Ted Lasso provides both. Next, we're going to talk about The Bear, which is on Hulu. I'm pretty sure it's from Fox, and it has the kid from Shameless in it, Jeremy Allen White. That show, I watched it, and I have the Hulu subscription where you need to sit through the ads, so I haven't really rewatched it too much. Plus, it also gives me anxiety because it's so the pace of it, it's so fast, and oh my god, it really shows you a glimpse at what it's like to work in a kitchen of a restaurant. It's so well written, and it's cool because the main character, he's Italian and Polish, and so am I. So when he was saying certain references and jokes, it just hit me a little harder because I'm like, that's funny. That's really funny. And I like the female character. I can't remember her name. Oh my god, I have to stop and look it up now. Sydney, okay, she's my favorite character, and I like how she's the newbie and the young one, but she holds herself strong against all these other people when she could really give in. She just stands up for what she believes in, and I like that a lot, and I can't wait to see the next season. Yes. This brings me to the next show, which is Shameless, which I didn't watch Shameless until I watched The Bear, and then I realized that the main character was in Shameless for all these years. And after I watched Shameless, I'm like, oh, no wonder why they cast him in The Bear, because it's very similar type of character where he's hardworking and he puts up with a lot. And it also takes place in Chicago, so I mean, Jeremy was like a no-brainer casting for the Bear, I think. But I like Shameless because, I mean, there's so many reasons to like it. It's so honest and doesn't care about portraying people in like a bad light. I feel like sometimes shows sugarcoat it in a way or don't show the full picture, and I feel like Shameless really shows different perspectives of a struggling family from different angles of all the kids and over the years, because the Shameless I think has 7 or 8 seasons, so you really see the kids grow up and how they deal with their home life and how some people deal with it better than others, but really none of them deal with it great. The sibling bond is kind of like the thing that like took me through all of the seasons, as well as like the family friend type of bond, because it shows that even if someone's not technically blood family, it doesn't matter. It just matters of who's going to be there when you need them, and that's family. Because there's plenty of people who are blood family, but if you need them, they'll make an excuse. So then, are they really your family if they're not going to help you when you need help? No. And Shameless really brought down that lesson to me about know what you deserve and don't accept less and stand up for yourself. And if someone treats you good, then spend time with them. And if someone doesn't, then don't spend time with them, even though it's hard to determine that. Once you determine it, you need to put your foot down and stand up for what is right for you. Clearly, I like TV shows that like teach me something. Teach me some type of lesson that I need to be taught. Okay, now we're going to take a short break for the sponsor. This week's sponsor is Ted Lasso's mustache.
Please tell Ted to use some beard oil on me because I've been feeling a little dry lately and could use some moisturization. Thank you for your time.
Thank you to this week's sponsor. Now on to the rest of the episode. This year I watched Normal People that has Daisy Edgar-Jones and Paul Mescal, like Pascal from like Tangled. I don't know how to say his last name. I like that show. I love how it's filmed and the long shots. If you told someone the story, you'd probably be like, this is not exciting, or this is not gonna be entertaining to watch the story of them, because you just say they're like school friends and then they become more than friends and then they just go separate ways. It's something that I think in my own writing a lot, I've had feedback where people are like, well, you need to add something to your writing. And I'm like, but the way I write, it's the importance of the small things in the scene that really are what I'm trying to focus on. So if I add more things, those small things won't have much of an impact because there'll be so much distracting from it. And I think Normal People really shows how powerful it can be to just stay with the simple and focus on what you want to get across with the scene, and it can be powerful. You don't need a whole bunch of like Marvel special effects to be entertaining. If it's rooted in truth, if it's an important story, then it's entertaining because the people who are watching are gripped into the story. So this show and its success really showed me, especially with the actors, that if you have the right people and they believe in something, even if it's like, it might be a simple story to some, if you see the depth of it and other people do too, then it can really be impactful. You just need to find the people who are going to see that special part of the story, because if it seems very simple to some and doesn't have a lot of action or jut out comedy, then people might not like it. But there are some people that will like it and that will want to stick around and watch the characters no matter what. If they're true and relatable, then they're gonna be some people who want to watch it. So the show really taught me to not try to change my writing for other people and to just stick to the simple things if that's what I feel is important. Next is New Girl, which is still available on Netflix. Pretty sure it has 8 seasons. I watched it for the first time when I had COVID. I watched all of the seasons, and the past year I've been rewatching them when I need something lighthearted and funny to watch. And I don't think I've ever watched it and not laughed out loud at least once. All the characters are good. Would I want to be friends with Schmidt? No, I don't think I would not want to be friends with him. A lot of them, I feel like, whose character am I don't think I'm like any of them. I feel like if I had to be a mix of any characters, I would probably be a mix of like Jessica Day and Nick Miller, just like overexcited about things, and then just like really weird about other things. Like Nick has his own way of doing things that he doesn't want to do it any other way, and I feel like I'm like that, and Jess is just really overly excited about things, and I think I'm like that too, and I'm fine with it. Like, I know I'm excited, and I'm okay with being excited. Why not be excited? Like, this could be a terrible moment and it's a good moment, so I'm gonna be happy about it. Yeah, I also have little Winston in me because he likes to do pranks, except I don't take pranks as far as he does. Well, I mean, maybe I have done pranks. I don't know. That's a personal opinion if someone thinks a prank is too far, but Winston really takes pranks way too far. I think the last season of New Girl is probably my least favorite because I feel like they knew that it was the last season and they tried to get in like the closings of a lot of people's stories, and they wanted to give the fans, I think, what they wanted. So that's kind of like the season that falls the most flat for me because it just felt like they were trying to finish it up. You know, they have some like creativity in how they reveal things in the story, but it's still kind of not my favorite. My favorite seasons are probably like the second or third season, and then I still like the other ones too, but I feel like in the beginning, beyond the first season, that's when they really had the most like innovative jokes and the storylines. And then as you get towards the end, they start to like, you know, like have a harder time of thinking of original things to include, which I totally get because they did so many seasons. But that's why I like probably the beginning seasons a little better, because everything is so outrageous and original that it's funny and it makes me laugh. Now, before we get onto like the more like crude humor shows, we're going to circle back to one of my favorite shows of all time, Hannah Montana. I watch it every time I get Disney Plus. I don't have Disney Plus like all the time. I just get a month here and there if I want to rewatch my favorite shows. And Hannah Montana is just good. I enjoy the movie too, Hannah Montana the movie. I watch it too a lot. I've watched it probably 3 times in the past year. It's just a funny show, and I think it puts all like new child shows to shame, because in the old Disney Channel, this is the really big difference between, I think, like kid shows today and before, is like Hannah Montana and Jason Earls and Billy Ray Cyrus, when they were playing those roles, Emily Osment, Mitchell Musso. See, I know all their names because I just love the show so much. All the shows I mentioned before, I can't mention most of the actors, but if I can mention the actors' names in the show, that means you know I really like the show, because I've been reading their IMDb a lot and probably watched like all the filmography of all the other actors. But anyway, that show, the characters play it as if they don't know what they're saying is funny, and that's what makes it funny. In shows today, especially kid shows, I feel like the actors are playing it as if they are trying to get a laugh, as if they're expecting a laugh, as if they know what they're saying is supposed to be funny, and that's what makes it not funny. Because for me, what is funny, as you'll see it with these next 2 comedies I mentioned, is when you take it seriously. When someone says something so serious and they're taking this like, this means the world to them, and it's so serious, and then from the outside perspective it's funny because you're like, why are they taking this so serious? It's just a small thing, it doesn't really matter that much, and that's what makes it funny, when the characters aren't in on the joke. But I feel like what shows today, especially for kids, a lot of the characters seem to be in on the joke, which makes the joke not funny, because the audience is kind of like hinted at they should laugh, and then when you don't laugh, you're kind of like, well, did I fail or did the show fail at making me laugh? That's just my opinion. Anyway, let's get back to my show list. We are going to move on to Righteous Gemstones. This show is not for the weak of heart. There were definitely times I laughed, and then I looked back at when I laughed and I'm like, that should not have been funny, but they made me laugh because the characters just are so outrageous, and they have no idea how outrageous they are, that it's funny, because this is just their life and we're just watching it. It feels like, I don't know, some type of reality show. that they don't know they're on, like they're being secretly watched and they're just on this reality show and they think they're like in a tragedy and they're really in a comedy. And that's why I find it so funny. I watched, what's the guy's name? Danny McBride, I think. I've watched his other shows after I liked Righteous Gemstones. I didn't find the other shows funny, so I don't know what makes this show different than the other shows. I think it's just the backdrop of religion and how these people who are supposed to be really great people are not great people. I think that's just what makes it funny, because their perspective on themselves is different than what other people think of them. And it's just a big contradiction, and they just keep getting into more and more trouble. It's just really funny. I really like it. And I remember as I was watching the shows, because I also don't have HBO all the time, I get a month at a time just to watch some stuff and save some money. I watched the episodes and I would always drink hot chocolate when I watched the episodes. So every time I have hot chocolate now, I'm like, oh, I should go watch Righteous Gemstones. But you know what I hate with HBO is when you have the app on like an iPad, when you watch Netflix, you can like minimize the show so you can watch it in the background while you're doing something on your iPad. But with HBO, you can't do that. At least it won't let me on my iPad. It won't let me minimize it so I can do something else like draw while I watch it in the corner of my screen. So that's why sometimes I don't watch HBO as much as I'd watch Netflix, because I can't be doing anything else on my screen if I'm watching HBO. Which is fine if you're watching a show for the first time, but if you're rewatching it, I mean, watching it in the minimized corners should be fine. So hopefully HBO like catches up to Netflix and makes that possible, unless they have it for a reason, because they don't want you like half watching a show. They want your full attention on it. But that'd be kind of stupid, since if you put it on the TV, you can be on your phone while it's on the TV. So it's not really stopping anyone. Just stopping me from watching it while I could be watching it while I'm trying to draw. They're losing my views. Anyway. The last show on the list I purposefully put last because it's my favorite right now, and I am on the third rewatch of it. The next season is going to be coming out. The show is called Succession, and yeah, now I'm realizing I didn't really give you a summary of some of the shows. I just gave you my review, and hopefully that's enough for you to go look it up if it sounds interesting. But for Succession, I will give you a synopsis. From the outside, you could say that it's a show about these rich people competing over who's going to take over their father's company when he chooses to step down. That isn't really my type of show, so I didn't really think I would like it. I watched the free episode when I didn't have an HBO subscription, and I'm like, kind of had to push through it. It didn't seem like something I would really like. Then I got HBO subscription, and I saw it on there. I'm like, let me watch the second episode. Let me see if it like catches my attention. And in the second episode, without giving away any spoilers, like some stuff happens that makes you kind of want to watch to see what happens next. Like it just is a sequence of events that you want to see where this ends up. And through being attached to that, I was like, this writing is special. Like, I wanted to watch it just to listen to the writing. I didn't really care too much about the characters. I wanted to know what would happen to them just like a curious mind. But I wanted to listen to the writing so I could learn from it. And there was something special there. Anyway, I got through the first season. Didn't really care about the characters. But then I started the second season. I'm like, let me watch the first episode of the second season to see if it like pulls me in. And if it doesn't, I'm just going to stop watching. Because there were 3 seasons out. Still three seasons out. But I'm like, I'm not going to make myself watch it if I'm not really hooked. So I started watching it and I got hooked right away. Like, the writing is good, and I feel like the actors have a better sense of who their characters are, and so do the writers. So I feel like that was more played into. Like, everyone was more defined, I feel like, and that was more interesting because the characters weren't just like blobs. I feel like they were more clear at what shape they were in, where they were in the story, and how they fit in with everyone else. And that's when I really got attached to the story and learning about these people, and they do terrible things. And at first you're like, these are all terrible people. And then you start to have not sympathy, but you understand where they're coming from, and that this is like what their normal is. Still don't really, it's not okay what they're doing, but you start to be like, okay, this in their head is not terrible, and they have to make a hard decision. In my mind, the characters, I'm trying to think if there's an exception to this before I say it, but a lot of the characters I think lack courage, because they could make it better, the situation that they're in. They could try to make it better, but because they're rich, they don't want to jeopardize that. Like, there's this character that is Logan's brother, and Logan is the one who runs the company. He's the father, and he has 4 kids who are one of them is going to take over the company when he steps down. Most likely. It could be someone else, but most likely would be one of his kids. And his brother is kind of like separate from the family because he doesn't approve what Logan does. And at first, he's kind of seen as like just boring and a jerk because he rejects what Logan does. And in a way, Logan can be respected because he's built a lot from nothing. But in another way, he's not great because what he's built, not something that's great, doesn't leave a great impact on people or the world. So that's where his brother like doesn't agree with him. And it's interesting how he is the one who's like isolated from the family because he thinks that what Logan's done isn't something to be proud of. So in a way, all the other characters don't want to diminish this thing that Logan accomplished because then they know it won't benefit them anymore. So it's a selfish thing for them. But that's what makes the story interesting, because these characters are all trying to grapple with what's the best thing for them to do. They're pretty selfish, all of them. Yeah, pretty selfish. They're trying to plan ahead, and they have this sibling bond, which is interesting because they will be so mean to each other. And then one time, like, Logan slapped one of his kids. He slapped Roman, and his brother Kendall was like so angry at his father for slapping Roman, even though Kendall would say such mean things to Roman. And Kendall was so like, he just screamed at his dad to never slap Roman again, and he was really checking on Roman to make sure that he was okay. Meanwhile, like a few scenes before, he was being so mean to Roman. So it's really interesting to see like what's okay in their head and how they deal with this abusing of each other, and then they still love each other. And I came to the conclusion that it's kind of like all of a game to them, where it's like, if I do this, this will happen. And it's kind of just like a game because they have money and they do all this, they travel a lot and they do all these things. So it's just like a game that they're playing, and it's kind of fun to be mean and fun to be rude because they're still rich. They still have the life they have, even if they're rude. So what's the point? What's the point? From this show, I learned the importance of making a decision and not trying to hide in a corner, which the characters in the show, they don't make good decisions sometimes, but they are forced to make one with the knowledge they have in that moment. And it really taught me to like get out of my slump and just make a decision and do it. And I know that in the future, maybe I won't agree with what I did, but I will need to know that in that moment, with the information I had and the experience I had, I made the best decision for me. And if I never make a decision because I'm worried that in the future I'm going to regret it, well, then you can't live like that. You'll never do anything. You can't. So this show really ingrained that in me, because the characters are constantly making decisions for themselves and undermining other people, but more so for themselves, and it takes their lives in a different direction depending on what choice they take. So I learned to make the best decision now, and then when I get to another decision, I'll make the best decision then. And if I'm true to myself with all these decisions, it'll lead me somewhere that's good for me. So half of this podcast was talking about Succession, but I just wanted to end with saying that I did take a quiz to see what Succession character I was. One quiz I got Tom, another quiz I got Greg, which I disagree with both, because both of them are like, they're just followers, they're not leaders, they don't ask for what they want, they don't fight for what they want, they're just kind of like limbo, and they just go in whatever direction the wind blows them, what seems best for them at that moment. They don't stand up for like moral reasons or whatever, they're slimy. So I don't agree with that. I would say that the character I'm most like is Jerry, which she's kind of someone who most people have a basic respect for her because she's been with the company so long. She's not completely an angel. I mean, she's been with the company so long and the company does terrible things. So she's not great either. But I mean, she stands up for things and she tells the truth. If she disagrees with someone, she tells them. She doesn't say she agrees and then lies behind their back. She's underestimated, and sometimes she is not respected as much as she should be, and people talk over her. Like, they'll talk about her while she's right there, and she'll just like take it and be like, okay, and taking note of what they're saying. I like this one scene where Roman reveals to her something that's going on, and he wants her opinion because he just genuinely wants it. And she's like, well, that wouldn't be good for me, so like that's all I can say to you. And he's like, well, I guess I shouldn't have asked you because you're kind of in on this and it would affect you, the answer, so obviously you're going to be biased towards yourself. And she's like, well, you told me now and this is important information, so you better be careful how I'm going to use it. And she really just told him, like, I'm going to use this information you gave me and I'm just warning you, so you know. And that just shows how straightforward she is and how she can make power moves, but because she's underestimated, when she makes these moves, everyone's kind of like, what? Like, you just did that? I didn't see that coming. So I relate to Jerry in some ways. So that's all I have to say today. It was a lot of talk. I think this is my longest podcast. I am going to stop editing my podcast so heavily where I cut out the ums and the pauses, because I was listening to podcasts and I was listening to mine and it made me so anxious because there's like no pausing and I talk so fast. So I'm going to try to talk slower and leave in more pauses so it sounds like more a natural pace of my speaking and not like a boom, 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 like trying to get through it real fast, because that makes me anxious and I don't want to feel anxious or make anyone else feel anxious when they're watching. Those are the notes I'm going to be taking to make my podcast better. If you have any suggestions on what I can do to make it better, my podcast, or what I could talk about, you can let me know on Instagram at Aloha Ariana. And yes, hope to catch you next week on That Weird Friend podcast. I'm your host, Ariana Kaminsky. I hope you stick around because I like your type of weird. I hope you like mine.